Good evening, everybody, and well, good morning from Hong Kong. My name is Eric Wishart. I'm the Standards and Ethics Editor of AFP News Agency. I'm also a member of the SPJ's Ethics Committee, and I'm delighted to be hosting this conversation this morning about the applications of generative AI in the newsroom, something that obviously we're talking a lot about. And we couldn't do better today. We've got two real experts in the field, Amy Reinhardt from AP and Joe Amdides from the Montclair State University Center for Cooperative Media. So we've got about an hour. We would really encourage the audience to send in questions. Just a quick bit of background about our speakers. Amy's the program manager for the AP's local news AI initiative, so she's very much involved in on the ground work. I mean, I think what we want to do today is really make this a practical discussion, not a theoretical one about the future of journalism particularly. And another obviously interesting question is about what does this mean for disinformation and misinformation? And Amy's very well placed to discuss that also because before she joined the AP, she was Deputy Director of First Draft, which was quite a pioneering site dealing with disinformation. So we're going to start with Amy, who's going to go through some slides of the work she's been doing with newsrooms for the AP. Joe's Assistant Director of Products and Events at the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University. He's a veteran. He was deployed to Iraq for the New Jersey Army National Guard. He's got a really varied background, and he did something that really impressed me very, very quickly in the discussion, produced a chat GPT AI handbook for journalists. And so we'll be coming back to that in quite shortly. He's got some good recommendations, some good do's and don'ts. But I thought my background for the past year or so, I'm the Standards and Ethics Editor of AFP News Agency. I live in Hong Kong, which explains the background. But I'm actually headquartered in Paris, and I work with the news management on all things to do with standards and ethics. And of course, we're looking very, very closely at the whole generative AI question. And we're drawing up guidelines, as I think everybody is at the moment, about how to use them. So to open the conversation, Amy, can you just take us through what you've been doing at the AP, please?
Sure. Glad to be here. Thank you for including me on this discussion. So at the AP, I've been working on the local news AI initiative, and it's is meant to address the technology gap between national and local news operations, particularly around automation and AI. And it's a Knight Foundation 2-year grant. And I'll take you through some of the work that we've already done. We wanted to know what the local news landscape was in terms of technology and people's interest and ability to adopt artificial intelligence. And what we found, we had 200 local news leaders take the survey. It was across all formats in every state. And what we walked away with is that local newsrooms could benefit most from very simple automations. There's a low capacity to want to take on risks, and because risk could mean failure, and failure could mean that they no longer produce the news that they produce. There's a concern about adding to an already wobbly tech stack. They're like, we can't possibly add one more thing to this. And then their primary concerns were the costs, the training, and the maintenance. They didn't want something that would break and that they'd have to wait around for somebody to come and fix. And so this is the automation wish list that people submitted, the things that they really wanted to have AI or automation fill. Now, from transcription all the way down to page layouts, there is a tool for all of these things. So the wish list has been fulfilled, essentially. The big problem, though, is that monthly bill. Some of the things on this list cost $100 or more a month. Some go into the tens of thousands of dollars a month, and that is just prohibitive for a very small newsroom. And the distinctions here, the blue is print, radio is orange, green is TV, and purple is digital only. But everybody seems to really want and like transcription. So once we had an understanding of what people wanted to know about or wanted to learn more about, we developed a 6-unit online course. We had more than 100 US local newsrooms participating. This is just an example of some of the people who taught things around homepage personalization, newsletter, automation with something as simple as if this, then that, and how data could be used best and harnessed through artificial intelligence tools. And that it continues to be online, and it is free at ai.ap.org. Then we moved into the product development phase of this. We opened up a pitch contest. We had 43 pitches submitted by newsrooms, again, across every format. We worked with 15 of those to process map what their hopes and dreams were for the automation or the AI that they wanted, and then developed the new process, hopefully with a lot less human intervention. And so we narrowed that list of 15 to these 5 that you see here. The ones with an asterisk, we will use some type of generative AI to produce. So the first thing listed is Michigan Radio. What they do is they take public meeting videos or recordings from YouTube, Vimeo, places like that, and add a summary. They add a transcription component to it, and that's all automated. And that's for every county in Michigan. And so then our part of that is we will add a summarization to that and a keyword identification to be able to ping journalists on topics that they're interested in, whether they're looking for the red light, at a particular corner, or any kind of pay increases for municipal workers. Those are the things that can be identified, and we think expedite the coverage of municipalities in Michigan. The second item is weather in Spanish. We want to take National Weather Service data and have that translated automatically into Spanish, particularly around hurricanes. Right now, their team works on this, and it takes them a number of people during a high intense moment. We hope that this can make that all automated, and we'll use natural language generation, which is maybe baby AI, if you want to even put it into the AI family. The third item is police blotter automation with the Brainerd Dispatch in Minnesota. We will take police blotter items that are sent as a PDF attachment daily through email, and we will sort that and have it produce into a digestible news nugget altogether that makes sense for their print and their online edition. We'll do email sorting and classification with WFMZ in Pennsylvania. And I'm sure a lot of newsrooms get a flood of email requests for event coverage, or maybe it's even a breaking news item or something like that, a tip that somebody sends in. This would, through training at the newsroom level, it will sort what bucket it goes into. So is this spam? Is this a legit news item? If it's a legit news item, it will go into their planner automatically. So that will hopefully save some steps and reduce redundancy among the staff. The last item is video summarization. Key pieces of a video will be identified by an editor. That will be summarized and placed into ready-made format for their ARC publishing system. So that's for KSAT in Texas.
Amy, if I can ask.
Yep.
I mean, when you're doing this, how much human intervention is there afterwards to check accuracy?
Right. So we don't recommend publishing anything without a human review.
Okay.
And our guidance along the way has been 80%, meaning the tech can work on things 80%, and then that last 20 has to be or should be human review. We really encourage that human in the loop, just because it's not always correct. It gets things wrong sometimes, and so we want to make sure that people are engaged actively with what they're producing. But in a small newsroom of maybe 3 or 5 people, having another thing take something 80% of the way there would be a huge relief, I think, for a lot of editors. So this is the example of the new workflow that we're working on with KSAT, where the video gets uploaded automatically, the video gets transcribed and then summarized and then delivered to the CMS. All of that is automated, whereas before it was done, each step of the way was done by a person. So we're hoping that this will make it faster for digital publishers to go into the website.
And they're using GPT-3?
Yes, we'll use GPT-3 from OpenAI to summarize.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not 4.
What's that? Not 4 yet, no. So this is an example of Lost Coast Outpost. The person who is the editor and chief technologist, his name is Hank Sims, and he came up with a Gendizer. And what he has done is he scrapes public meeting pages, and as they get updated, that is automated. And then he uses GPT-3 to summarize those meeting agendas. And that's then all automated. He does this for about $10 a month. That is the real cost to him. And here's an example of a summary of one of those meeting requests or one of those meeting agendas. And what's fun is, it's Hank's site. He can do what he wants. He has this in regular written news English, or you could read this as a sea shanty or a pirate or a Scooby-Doo. Like, he has added some fun. And to me, that's always a bonus when you can add a little bit of flair or fun to the whole process. This is also an example from Hank's website. This is an image generated by DALL-E. He was straight out of the gate using images from DALL-E in July when it was released. And I asked him, was he worried about putting local artists out of work? And he said, I've never hired a local artist. We don't have money for that. We don't have time. We're just up against the wall to try and produce the news every day. And the search engine, well, social media especially, prioritizes images. And he said he can produce an image like this for about 5 cents. And about 30 seconds with the prompts. And so some newsrooms have written into us to confess how they're actually using ChatGPT. So Hank uses the technology behind ChatGPT, GPT-3, and ChatGPT is the interface that we all became acquainted with in November, December, and have been excited by. And newsrooms have confessed that they're using it to generate summaries, to creating outlines, keyword lists, adding hashtags, headline brainstorming, and construction of HTML. And I think these are all great use cases for local newsrooms to explore. I think if at the end of this dynamic time that we're in, if we have not convinced small newsrooms, 5 or fewer, to use technology like this, we will have failed on some part, because this technology was written for small newsrooms, in my opinion. Like that, it's very flexible and easy to use. So I'm inspired and continue to be inspired by people who come up with all kinds of developments, like Joe, who will take you through some of the things he's working on. But this is another example on OpenAI's examples page. This gets overlooked. Again, this is the technology that runs ChatGPT. And if you just go through the list, you can find dozens of ways that newsrooms might be able to take advantage of this technology. And, the too long didn't read it summary. You could even have it do interview questions, use it as a customer service chatbot. Translation has been really strong with GPT-4 in particular. For our own project, we will likely use Whisper for translation. It surpasses anything that we've tested on the market so far in terms of transcription. So we're really encouraged by that. So I hope that some people take away some can-do spirit with some of these examples and try this out for yourself. But with that, I'll turn it over, because I don't think there's anybody more can-do than Joe.
You are muted, Eric.
You put your hand up, Joe. Were you going to say something?
No, I just was giving a little nod to Amy, because the work that she and her team have done and are doing, and just honestly, just the methodological aspects of what Amy and her team are doing and always have done, I find very, very impressive, and personally, encouraging, because I think we need a much more rigorous and coordinated approach to this. And the fact that, her team is working with so many different people and different stakeholders, I think is great, because I do think that this is most useful for small newsrooms, particularly people with like 5, actually less than 5 full-time, or even sometimes 5 staff at all. I do think there are larger organizational use cases for these tools, and I'm interested. I don't have a lot of any large newsroom experience. I've been working with hyperlocal and local and regional publications for the last almost decade. So that's where my focus really is, and I have been sort of following. I've been playing around with these sort of generative AI tools for the last year. Probably around like January or February of 2022. ChatGPT obviously wasn't out. There were little things here and there, Octi. I think there's another one I'm blanking on right now that it was sort of been around, or Jasper, I think as it was called. It's still called. It's great. It's one of those tools that it's sort of mid-level competitors for OpenAI, if you can even call them competitors. But this thing really took off, obviously, when chat was released, and it's only grown from there. Even especially the sort of branching of different interfaces for the API. So one thing that I'm addicted to, and I still know I'm not even scratching the surface in terms of the power of it, is something called GPT for Work. I can post a link there. This thing lets you bring the API, including GPT-4 and all this, into Google Sheets and call commands from Google Sheets, and then click and drag on that cell and call the same command or a series of different prompts on your data right there. And it's all, the extension is free. It's a simple browser extension or add-on for Google Sheets and Google Docs. It just, the possibilities of like even these simple, mundane, dare I say, bullshit tasks that journalists and newsroom employees are forced to do just because somebody's got to write this or somebody's got to draft the meeting summary notes for like, meeting minutes for between colleagues. These administrative tasks that would often eat up so much of our time are now simply all we're doing is reviewing and maybe making some edits and tweaks. Tweaks. It is incredibly important to have robust, consistent, and intensive human oversight in these things. But if I'm being absolutely honest, most of the stuff that I do, or that most of us do when we're sending these like mundane emails back and forth, I'm not even putting robust human oversight into that. I'm doing a lot of that on autopilot. And the quality of what it's able to do when you give it information to work with, as opposed to what the sort of scary sounding NPR interviews talk about. Well, I had it write an article, I had it write a story. And I'm like, no, we're not having it write content. No, we wanted to generate, organize, and combine information we already have. We'll let the models work themselves out. I don't need, I don't read stories, good writing, because I really need a good bulleted summary. The human experience of reading and conveying and communicating human emotion and experience is where a lot of that stuff is. That is not being replicated here. They're trying, sure, and some of the stuff is funny. The cute, songs and poems are great. And I built my own chatbot that's just sarcastic the whole time because I thought it would be fun. But the real value, in my opinion, and in my experience in talking with these newsrooms, of very small newsrooms and operations, is it's the mundane bullshit that we have to do day in, day out, that is in the same format that if we had the time, we would build Google Forms to just fill in the fields. These kinds of things can now apply a level of customization and tweaking and a conversation with that information, as opposed to a rote, memorized sort of keyboard monkey kind of a thing where you're just banging out the stuff because you need to. So I think that's where the biggest value is. And I'll leave it there.
Amy, you also were drawing the line between content creation and publication and doing the basic work tasks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, there are two things it's good for, or there's two things that it does: knowledge and language. Stick with the language. So like, and that's my guidance, is that once you've written your article, put it in to summarize it, put it in for A/B headline testing, put it in for too long didn't read it, put it in for make this have sense, make sense to a 5-year-old. You know what I mean? Any kind of incarnation that you want. Joe,
I'll say one more to add to that great list is give me 5 reasons why people should care about this. Give me 5 reasons why publishers would want to attend this event, or why this event is important to this community. And you can use these kinds of things and check them and use them to make the case, not just for the story that you're telling or the journalism that you're doing, but for what the context, what the stakes are, and you can have it contextualize and spit back to you and ask questions and debate you and do deliberative practice around these topics to really give journalists in a very short amount of time, and editors and publishers and all this, a better understanding of the whole picture of what their role in this community and with this information is. What are we doing with these stories, but besides telling them? How are we telling them? What kind of what kind of feedback, what do we see when we look in the digital mirror, when our story looks in a digital mirror, and what happens when we bend that mirror a little bit? What does it look like? That is exactly what excites me the most about it. And we haven't even talked about fine-tuning models and training them on your data or your archives and what doors that opens.
So Joe, I'm sharing my screen. And so you wrote this Beginner's Prompt Handbook ChatGPT for Local News Publishers. So can you talk us through this a bit? What inspired you to do it? And can you tell our audience what it contains? I don't want to scroll through it because there's a lot of.
Sure. Do you want me to screen share? I can screen share real quick.
Yeah, you talk us through it. That'd be great.
I've got it ready and on deck. Here we go. All right. So I wrote this. The impetus for why I wrote this is because I got. Ultimately, I got. I was obsessed with it already, and been using it forever. And it was the first time I'd come across somebody saying, "Hey, pay $2 for this." And I've seen people sell ebooks before. I know what the deal is. They just want your email or they want a couple bucks. And I was like, you know what? I'm clearly spending an inordinate amount of time playing with this tool. I could throw $2 at this thing. And 2 seconds after I opened it up, I knew I could see the matrix. I saw this was generated by ChatGPT. It was so obvious in the structure and the way that it was written and put together. And it was basic. I was very upset. I was like, you know what? That's bullshit. I was very mad. And I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I could write a good one. I've been thinking about all this stuff. I've been saving 1 million bookmarks. And maybe this would help me get my thoughts in order. And just so happened that I had been dying to find a project or a little task that could help me teach myself Notion, because I see Notion used all the time. And I was like, oh, perfect. And they have AI features in Notion. So I was like, this is it. I'll do it here. I love Notion, by the way, really cool. And so I started with this, we have like the Neiman Lab prediction series. I got asked to write one again this year. And I wrote about ChatGPT because I can't shut up about it. And I got the table of contents here. It is essentially, I've tried to go through and break down all of the different areas of conversation that I've been having with people regarding this stuff, whether it's the broader picture of what ChatGPT and generative AI means for local newsrooms and local journalism, to some of the capabilities and limitations, like what can it do? What can it do? How should we talk about trust and transparency? What are some general guidelines, that are circulating out there? What other people or organizations have been thinking about these things and putting them down on paper?
Can I just jump in? One, you showed something there that's very relevant. And I was wondering if it was relevant to your friend who published the image from DALL-E. Is what about IP? What about intellectual property rights when you're reproducing stuff produced by AI?
It's an enormous question. I'm having a hard time even generating a response from it, because it just, AP produces 3,000 photos a day, 2,000 text items a day. I'm sure, Eric, AFP is similar. And the fact that these language models have, sourced the bigger parts of the web means that our information is in there. When someone borrows an image for social media uses, we have automation that goes to check for that, and we go after what is owed to us in terms of for copyright purposes. So I think that it's a huge issue. It is one that AP is thoroughly across, and we know that these any type of litigation is not quick, cheap, or easy, and sometimes the outcomes are uncertain. In previous copyright cases, which is how most of these are tried in the past, the judges have sided with big tech, saying that what they produced is completely different and helpful to humanity. My hope is that some of those judges have learned how helpful some of the big tech is to humanity and maybe question that a little more. But just to say, the outcomes are uncertain, and we don't have any guidance on that at the moment. very interested in the Getty lawsuit against Stability AI, and to see how that progresses. Again, I think that we're looking at 2 years before we have some kind of answer on that.
I mean, one thing that people always like to say is you can ask ChatGPT to write a story in the AP style. Mm-hmm. But where did it get the AP style? Did it get it from the AP style book?
Well, it probably did. And also, a lot of newsrooms follow AP style. So if they've ingested other newsrooms, and they have, that is where it's coming from. We have looked it over with our style book editors, and it's not always correct.
Okay.
And so but it's, if English isn't your first language, or maybe you want to make sure that you're confident that you're writing in a particular style that other people can absorb, I think ChatGPT could be good for taking your original work and making sure that it's cogent.
You're muted. But that's from the sort of content producer angle that's being recycled on these bots. But I mean, if you're taking an image from DALL-E, who owns the intellectual property on it? Do you, because you've created it, or does DALL-E? Same thing for text from ChatGPT.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I generally don't think about that too much, honestly, because it for one reason, it feels like the cat's sort of already out of the bag at my level. Amy and the AP certainly have a lot of concerns and things they can worry about. I'm not the guy to ask about that. Yeah, I'm just not the guy to ask about that. Amy,
can we go back into your handbook? I mean, one thing which I found very useful was how to do the prompts, how to write the prompts. And you say it's absolutely critical. Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, prompts are, I want to take one step back, because I think, especially since the word chat is in ChatGPT, I think people see this as like a simple text exchange. And I want to make it very clear that one of the big like sleeper implications of this technology is beyond just being able to get it to generate cute things. It is a new way of speaking to and getting your computer to do things. And it is a coding language. It takes on elements of a coding language, in that you can now communicate your intent and your requirements and your needs to the machine in natural human language, and then have the machine interpret and understand that. And every other coding language is exactly that. All it is the ability to put text into the computer and have the computer understand what it's supposed to do when that happens. And that is where that is no longer solely the purview of people who spent years and hours and tears and their dignity pouring that into a computer to learn a language or several programming language and spending 10, 20 years mastering it. I'm not saying you're an expert coder instantly, but I'm saying that the way that this is evolving and the way that it is allowing people to communicate their intent and their desires and instructions to a machine in natural language and have it understand that and execute it is the big thing. And I think we need to think about that in that way when we talk about prompting, right? Because there are elements of coding and computer logical structures and decision-making processes that go into good prompting, which, as a side note, I think will be less and less relevant as the space becomes more normalized and ubiquitous. And we already see that with like a lot of the different assistant roles that pop up and the customization. But when you are prompting, you want to be very clear. You want to be very clear. There's a couple of prompting tips here. I'll just share my screen real quick. I'm working on these. I'm giving a talk at the News Product Alliance tomorrow, and we've got this slide here. These are the 8, or at least 8 of the prompts that both Microsoft and OpenAI recommend, and several other communities like the AI Exchange, which you should absolutely check out. You want to break your prompts into complex tasks into smaller digestible steps, and you want to use as often as possible the chain of thought or step-by-step prompting and instructions. So instead of just saying do this and this and this, say I need this. This is my goal. This is how I would like to achieve it. This is what I want the output to look like. And here are the steps. And I want you to think step by step and go through each process to create them. GPT-4 is a lot better at this than 3.5. You also want to, whenever possible, provide training examples, which is like just show it how you expect it to respond, and that's very useful. Same thing with adding context, pasting in other information. Repeating the instructions at the end is also useful because there's a recency bias with the way that it interprets your prompts. So if you put something up top, it will do that. But if you have more context at the bottom, it can be helpful to remind it every once in a while. Include specific words and phrases like tone and style and emotional content. Put that in there to give it a better sense of what you're doing. Also, punctuation, spacing, headings, and symbols like bullets or dashes and hyphens, very useful. And then tell it what you want the end product to look like. Those are what I would say are probably the most useful prompting tips that I can give you without going into the entire book.
Amy, how concerned are you about bias in the results? Gender bias, other kinds of bias, because that's something we talk about.
Because all of these things were created by human beings.
Right.
Humans have their own biases, their blind spots, and maybe it's not an outright bias that someone holds, but just a giant blind spot. They can't imagine another person's worldview. People working in tech, it's largely, it's kind of one demographic. It's a lot of men. Yeah, it's a lot of white guys. Who are really smart, but maybe just again limited and in their worldview or their understanding of the complexities. I think Casey Newton had a great example of the biases where the prompt was to write a classic love story. Well, and in Shakespearean prose, and it did a great job, but it was a heteronormative love story. That is not the experience for everyone, and maybe it's impossible to write a love story that appeals to everybody, but just to say, like, that's the kind of stuff you're going to get out of this. And there's absolutely gender bias involved. There was a great example this week of assuming that the lawyer was a man and the assistant was a woman. I've made that error too. When somebody said if a surgeon couldn't operate on their child, they said it was their son. How is that possible or something? And I didn't even make the leap that the surgeon could be a woman. I made the leap that it was a gay marriage. And it had to be two men. So just to say, we all have our blind spots. That is inherent in the information that they choose to train these models on. You can force that issue. There's a researcher in New Zealand who did far right ChatGPT. He did a fine tuning of a model, and for $300. And a little bit of time, he was able to create something that would spit back, suspicions around climate change, for example, or who the best president of the United States has been.
So your handbook's great for the positives. What are the don'ts, you would say, if you're talking to journalists in newsrooms? And I mean, I know you designed it for small newsrooms, but I mean, reading it applies to all journalists. I think it's a very good guide. And that's one question that I think Natalie, who asked a question in the chat, what kind of online courses can we recommend? Amy posted the AP one, and I think your handbook's good, but what don'ts are there? And I mean, maybe the kind of feedback that you're getting from newsrooms, people saying, can we do this and can we do that? So what would the don'ts be?
Well, number one, everybody does this. They're all like, I asked it what my research paper said, and it gave me like 15 fake citations. Or I asked it about me, and it gave me wrong information. And don't treat it like a search engine. There is a search engine AI. It's called Bing, and it's actually really fantastic. We never talk about it in these panels because chat got there first, but Bing is incredible, and it appears in a sidebar in your browser, so you can just open it up on any web page and it'll ingest that content. So don't use ChatGPT like a search engine. And don't don't be so sure. This is something that anybody who's ever worked in research and has had to read enough articles and consume enough media and content and information, there's this perpetual fear that you're going to accidentally plagiarize someone, a thought you had or you read that some brilliant professor or researcher said, or that you saw in a paper, and you a month or two goes by and it just sits in your head until you forget you even read it somewhere else. And it's this constant fear, or at least it is for people with anxiety like myself. But I think that is also present. You also want to be sure, because you can't be sure that it's not going to do that. You can't be sure that in predicting what it thinks is the most likely next word or set of words, that it won't make some kind of combination that ends up making you look bad. So always check it. Don't trust it. Just like you shouldn't trust anything you see on the internet. Don't trust anything that the internet spits out at you instantaneously, as if it were true. Every journalist, every publisher and editor runs by these rules. You don't publish things that you don't stand behind. And the same rule goes for some sketchy freelancer who's the only person who can do it, some major company who wants you to run articles, or you are having a robot spit back text to you. You run it, you're responsible for it. So don't get complacent, and don't sit there and think that just, because it's so useful or it's so correct most of the time, that you can just, let it slide this time. Always, always check, and don't be lazy about it. This gives you more time to focus on important stuff because you don't have to do the bullshit anymore. Don't use that as an opportunity to just be more lazy about the important stuff as well.
I mean, you hear all this stuff about, generative AI replacing journalists. Well, I mean, it's a particular view of journalism, because obviously it's not going to replace a journalist covering the war in Ukraine on the ground. But I mean, have you found any examples of people wanting to use it to write and publish stories? Have you come across this?
BuzzFeed News.
Yeah.
Every tech entrepreneur you talk to.
I know, yeah, right. Can you give that example, Amy?
Well, I mean, BuzzFeed News has closed its news department and has absolutely doubled down on using generative AI to post travel stories, for example. Right. But I can see, you can imagine the pink slime sites. This is going to be a win for them. There's also newsrooms that have no capacity, and this builds that capacity. And I don't think they're doing it for nefarious reasons, but in some ways, you just need to know what time the meeting is tonight and where it's located. You don't necessarily need, pithy prose around it. So in that case, it's maybe not useful. But I think that when we've worked with newsrooms, we really focus on having AI help move and distribute information, not journalism.
Okay. Right.
So we're talking, when is that meeting going to happen? What about the community calendar? What about the school lunch menu? All of those things that absorb people's time, but also keep people subscribing. If it's a newspaper, those are reasons why they continue to subscribe. It's probably not for the journalism, unfortunately. But one thing pays for the other, so you can continue to do journalism. But I think in this moment, I think the only wrong thing to do, especially if you're a small newsroom, is to not try and to see how this might work for you, and to try and be as fearless as Joe has been in terms of just getting in this. I mean, Joe's like, oh, it feels like it's been forever. It has for Joe, because he probably has done this all weekend long since December. But for the rest of us who have napped occasionally since then, it's it's a really exciting time, and I really hope people take advantage of that. It's not all good. It's not all good. Like you mentioned.
I think Joe counts as a generative AI native already. I think you get in there early, Joe. Joe. Sorry, Amy.
No. That's all right.
Joe, you also talk about transparency, I think, in the you have to be transparent, and I think there was a couple of questions. And also, Amy, I mean, if you can both talk to that, how transparent, at what stage in this process of using generative AI or any form of AI do you have to declare it to your audience? I mean, if you've done a summary of a council person's speech or a document, I mean, at what point does it reach the level where you have to say, AI, help me in this one? Joe faster than Amy.
I struggle with this one because I'll start at a little bit of a cop-out. When was the last time you saw this transparency around who edited what story?
Right.
or who wrote the headline for a story. We don't do it. Journalism doesn't do it. They're totally fine with that. In fact, it seems in some circles weird to ask, like, what do you mean? That's how we do it. You know, how many times do you declare that you used Grammarly to check your work, or that you used Photoshop to auto color or auto tone certain images? Or you can go down a rabbit hole with this. That being said, the real answer is be as transparent as you would with an audience and a community that you cared about and you wanted to bring into the process. I think journalism as a whole, as a process, as an institution, and as a practice, needs to be more, not just transparent, but engaged, and bringing people and building with people, not just for them. And I think a lot of times you'll find that even members of your community, your readership, your viewers, whatever, they'll often have really cool ideas about how you can use this stuff. And if you walk them through, at least at some capacity, on the center's website, we have a general disclosure statement about right next to our ethics and corrections policies about how we use the tools and what we are willing to do with it, what we're not. Wired magazine has a really good example of that, which I link to in the book, of what they're considering. So they will use it to generate social media copy and suggest alternate headlines and things like that, and to create little too long didn't read summaries at the top. But they won't be using generative AI for photos and images. That's a decision that their organization has made. They defend and stand by that decision. I think transparency is the same conversation we've always been having, which leads to a lot of the other trust and verification and understanding issues that we have with the public and members of the community. Is people don't know what the hell goes on around here behind the scenes, and they certainly don't know we don't even know what's going on behind the scenes in these bots. So you have to meet these folks where they're at, and you have to be honest with them about how you are thinking about this. And I think you'll find that doing that will help you across the board, not just with you know, the AI. Everybody's going to blur over and skip right over the little disclaimer. And it's the same thing with the cookies. How many times are you annoyed? You just click accept all cookies, and everybody, it's those kinds of methods have their limitations. And I think it's much better to be open and have an ongoing dialogue about your approach to this and your organization's approach than it is to be worried about the specifics of what exact language should we use when we do this, although that's still important at some level. Amy,
Amy,
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I
both
just
within the AP and also when you're doing that training, what do you tell? What's the message on transparency and at what point do you say we used an AI tool to do this?
Yep. So AP, when we produce our, when we use natural language generation for our earnings reports, at the bottom, we tag it that, you know, this is created with DataScribe and data. And I think we were talking about this today, that maybe we should add, you know, and reviewed by an editor, you know,
Right,
and I think that journalism, as ever, is often terrible about telling its own story and to explain to people. And I think, especially now, people want to know, you know, is this artisanal journalism, or is this created by a bot? And so, you know, and I think, you know, we have AP, as AFP has a lot of people and a lot of humans moving this journalism around, and we ought to brag about that as much as we can. So I think the public, as Joe said, cares, and I think that they would want to know how the sausage is made. Stephen Giles asked, you know, what about, you know, if you use a summarization, do you put a byline on the summary? I feel like that gets into the weeds of what Joe was saying, of like, we don't put who wrote the headline and we don't put who edited the story. So summarization seems a little too granular, especially if it's summarizing something you gave it. If you gave it the story and it just summarizes it, you know, especially if it's the nut graph, I think it's safe to say that is your story, Stephen, and your summary.
How accurate do you think the summarization is?
What's that?
How accurate is summarization?
You want to test it? We can test it right now.
Go for it.
You were throwing caution to the wind doing a live test.
Get somebody drop in the chat, drop something they've written, or give me something that Eric's written so that he can know for himself how accurate it is. And
Amy, you want to put in some AP?
Well, I could really, that's often not fair, because AP, the summary is often the first graph.
That's true. We won't, we can leave that out, but yeah, it's pretty accurate. It's pretty good at taking the stuff that you give it and manipulating it. It is not as good at it. It is objectively bad in most cases at coming up with stuff whole cloth, because again, the whole way it works essentially, and way simplified, is it's just guessing what the next most likely word is based on all the other words it knows and the order that they are in. So, you know, when it's making it up by itself, it's fine. But when it has something to latch onto in the moment, in the user message, in the prompt, it's much better at that. And GPT-4 is even better than 3.5 was.
Right.
Agreed.
And we've got a question in it. Actually, it's a topic I wanted to follow into from Gustav Gattu. Hope I pronounced your name properly. Have you seen examples of nefarious use of generative AI to influence journalism, e.g. astroturfing?
Well, the influence journalism, I don't know, but the GOP just released an all AI generated attack ad or whatever against Biden. It was trash. There, like some of the photos, there's like a cigarette coming out of the middle of the guy's lip. It's clearly they don't care. But the thing is, it's the exact same messaging that they would have they've been using for years and decades. It's just now they can do it cheaper and crappier and churn it out faster. That's really where it is. They still blamed immigrants and trans people for basically every problem in society. They still made it seem like it's going to be bedlam and chaos and crime if Joe Biden continues destroying this country. Like, the messaging isn't changing, nothing's changing, just the quality and ability to produce it. Quality's gone down and the ease of access has gone up, which that's what happens when you democratize a technology or a means of production.
Amy, this information, particularly with your background with First Draft, I mean, your antenna must be very
I'm worried about well, the speed at which this can all be generated and how it can also be automated and filtered out to other places to do exactly what this person asked about, is astroturfing. I think about 3 weeks ago, we saw our first round of generative images. Elliot Higgins, for reasons unknown to me, decided, he's the editor and founder of That, created these images, I think as a joke, about Trump being arrested, but that joke got lost, of course, as it got shared around the interwebs. And then the Pope's coat is another thing. And there was a whole earthquake scenario that was manufactured in the Pacific Northwest, or that the earthquake took place in the Pacific Northwest, and a suite of images around that. That's a problem, those things. And the biggest problem is, if you're a fact checker, you want to be able to point to the source and say, this is not true, and here's why. But if there's no source to point to, you can say, we think it might be generated by AI, but that's not necessarily true or false. You know what I mean? It's like, we're getting close to the idea that this might not be true, but when there's no breadcrumb left in that image, it's a problem. So, and Joe had mentioned earlier about audio too being.
I was just going to say, yeah, I'll give you one scare.
Yeah, you were quite concerned. I think the thing you said you were most concerned about was audio. Yeah.
Audio it's incredible what you can do on 11labs.io with 4 to 5 minutes of clean audio of someone's voice. I'm not just talking about like getting Tucker Carlson to, creating like fake podcast ad spots from Tucker Carlson's inevitable podcast venture where he does like mail enhancement bill ads, which is hilarious. But I'm talking about phone call audios that go out, campaigns go out to voters in an exact beautiful replica of whatever local politician they're running against, saying all the wrong things to get people to vote or misleading them on the day of the voting. I'm thinking a lot of grandmas and grandpas are going to be buying a lot of Target gift cards and losing that money because all of these scammers, not even just the generation ones, but the ability to take a voice in real time and change that voice using AI and make it sound like someone else, someone you trust, someone you don't trust, someone you would love to hear say the things that are now somehow magically being said in real time to you. And if, as we're talking, I could literally at this point, I could take any text, I could throw it into 11 Labs and have a almost perfect replica of like Tucker Carlson or Joe Biden or me saying it with very natural sounding intonations by the time Amy finishes her next point. It's incredible, and it's much harder to detect. The video, the photo stuff, there's inconsistencies, and there are in the audio if you know what to look for or listen for, but it's put that through a phone receiver and it's so much harder instantly.
And Amy, I mean, I think one thing, and again, this is really an area of your expertise, is, and I think AFP is a partner of First Draft at the time, we were involved in developing verification tools for images, but I don't think the tools at the moment are up to speed on this, like the Pope image. I mean, could you perhaps explain why the existing verification tools for digital verification aren't really capable of detecting an AI generated image like that?
Yeah, well, there's for now, human eyes are pretty good at detecting fake images that are made with generative AI, because like Joe said, the cigarettes coming into the middle of the lips or whatever, that's going to get better. And I would say in the next 6 months, it'll be seamless, you know, and the weird ears and the eyeglass stuff that happens now is just not, or the fingers where there's like 6 fingers now, that's going to go away, and we'll miss those days where it was easier to do. So right now, for verification, people use things like reverse image search.
Yes.
And that can be through Yandex and TinEye and RevEye and even Google Images.
Could you explain how that works briefly for people?
Yeah, you
not
enter,
familiar with it?
you can upload an image through those, or you can use a browser extension and run a search. InVid is a great tool that AFP is part of that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great tool where you can do reverse image searches, all of those reverse image searches, I believe, in that one dashboard. So you can, what it looks for is it does a pixel by pixel match, and it's looking for other instances of a photo. You know, for generative AI, you know, the thing right now that is something for people to look at if you're in the verification space is if it's like the Trump images, there's only that one image from that one angle. Now, if this was actually happening, you'd have video, you'd have 10 different angles, you know, and you would be seeing it from more than one source. You would be seeing it from hopefully 3 different news entities that you've heard of before, maybe BBC, maybe AFP or AP. And those are the things that you would want to check for. But I stepped away from disinformation and verification a couple of years ago, and I've worried that maybe my skills had atrophied. But, you know, as AP is looking at helping in the space of verification, I was like, oh, wow, nothing has been developed since I've stepped away. Maybe the industry stopped while I gathered my thoughts.
No, I
But,
mean,
there's no more misinformation. Your work's done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Stephen asked another question. Would a story ever be read with an AI voice? Well, I mean, we're seeing these virtual newsreaders, aren't we? The Chinese did it, Kuwaitis. I don't know how convincing they are, though. Joe, do you think they're convincing?
This is what again? Say that again.
Virtual newsreaders, like
oh, like the apps that you use to browse and see what's.
No, you actually have. It's like somebody reading the news, except it's not.
Oh, you mean like AI avatars that really
avatars.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends. Sometimes I don't really need a personality. I don't know if people like to look at faces, I guess. But I don't know if I don't think they're super effective. I think if you're getting it from that source, you might as well just be getting it from like an Alexa, news briefing or something like that. So the people who are gravitating to that are either just had it put in front of them on their feed on TikTok or something, or they already don't care whether or not it's a person who's actually reading it out loud. Yeah, and if you can't tell, at a certain point, if you can't tell what's the difference for the user. But yeah, I don't know. That's an open, I haven't really thought too much about that one.
Amy, you say that, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say the New York Times, I think for the long read, every Sunday they have an AI read the long read.
And can you tell the difference?
What's that?
Can you tell the difference?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's just a little, it sounds synthetic, but if I'm on a long car trip and the story is really compelling, I can kind of overlook it. But yeah, the intonation is just not quite there. Again, I think all of that's going to change.
What else from your handbook, Joe, would you like to discuss? What advice in your handbook would you like to share?
Well, there's 2 sections in particular. One is the sort of possible use cases that I put up front. It's like 50 different,
feel free to share your screen.
Sure. Yeah, I'll share it. And then as well, I also the end of it with the list of additional resources and tools. One in particular, and I think he's on this call, Mike Riley with journalisttoolbox.org. He's just been going nuts collecting all of these tools. I mean, he has massive lists. I'll show you real quick a few local news cases. So these are honestly, a lot of these are already out of date on because I mean, they're still possible, but they're already sort of out of date. And I put a screenshot of this list in the chat for anybody so that you don't have to pause to read now. But and then at the end, honestly, the additional links and resources, the appendix here, I've just been loading that up. Microsoft just released a brand new prompt engineering guide, which gets into all kinds of really great stuff. The AI Exchange is also an incredible resource. It's two sisters, Rachel Woods and her sister, I can never remember her sister's name. I feel so bad. But they run a great shop over there. The AI Exchange is where I've learned so much. You can see them cited throughout this list. I've been really enjoying like these sort of super prompts, if you will, like I like to call them, where they're really long and detailed instructions that do things like this one takes the transcript and it summarizes it. It gives me quotes, it gives me social posts, and then I can ask it to explain why it chose and selected certain quotes. These things are always sort of in flux and being developed, but I'm having a lot of fun building those. Really just the use cases. And I want people to go through and look at some of these prompts that I've put together here. I want them to go through and think really about how this can change, especially even when you add things like simple automation with Zapier. So most of the way that we talk about this stuff, and again, going back to the whole GPT for Sheets things, I don't think we've really seen any wild innovations in spreadsheet technology in a while. This seems like another area where we really are sleeping on the value of this. As beyond simple text generation and as a more integrated way of discussing and having conversations with and relating to our data, our work, our information, and our output. And I think if we think about it in that way and go beyond what the immediate aspects of it are and think about the implications and all the creative ways that you can just slip those added functionalities into your typical workflow, I think you're going to start to realize how much more time you're going to be able to spend on more important tasks rather than constantly having to go back to those same routine, monotonous activities that we all know and love.
And Amy, I mean, the AP's been has been producing results, I think company results for a long time, hasn't it?
Since 2014, yeah. And then
I remember a former editor-in-chief came to talk at the FCC in Hong Kong about that. And yeah, you were doing it quite early on.
Yeah. And it's, if you think about 9 years ago, 9 years ago, and now we're here. And so as I would describe that, it's, it's natural language generation, it's spreadsheet city, and very predictable outcomes every single time. The thing about generative AI is there's no rail, there's no road, and therefore the outcome is unpredictable. And that's the exciting part about it, and also the terrifying thing about it, especially for journalists who like to be right and need to be right.
I see you using ChatGPT 3, not 4. Any reason for that? Is it cost or? You mean at with our work in particular? Yeah, in your slides you were ChatGPT 3.
We're using whatever they have for whatever OpenAI has on its API. I think is it GPT-4 at this point?
You need to apply for API access for GPT-4. I got it and I got the plugin stuff, but literally today they just updated now they have like a new 3.5 with web browsing access. Like you just cannot keep up. Your best bet is to just dig in on the fundamentals and just understand it as a new thing. And then, follow along when you can, look at the new tools, the shiny things, but think about it from a more structural perspective, I think.
Yep.
But yeah, GPT-4 is more expensive. 3 is still
$20 a month, I think, right?
No, well, that's GPT plus, like that's Chat GPT plus. That's the Pro plan. That is entirely separate from the use-based API. Every API call you make to the OpenAI costs a certain amount based on how much text it sends and receives. So yeah. And
those prices now are suppressed because of the AI arms race that's happening. So again, if you're a small newsroom, this will be your cheapest year ever to try and innovate ever, because the prices are lower than what they will likely climb to once it's decided who's going to be the top dog in this fight.
Yeah, I will say also the good news for that is there are many open source or leaked actually models that you could use on a separate computer to play around with and sort of teach yourself there. And they're becoming easier and easier to install. And then of course, there's always the SaaS model, where if you can find a reasonable subscription price and get a certain number of tokens or whatever per month, you know, a lot of newsrooms, a lot of services like that, it sucks in my opinion, and it's an eternal squeeze of your wallet. I'm like, I will literally buy your license if it's a lifetime license, even if I don't use a product, because I need those to come back again. But if you need to do it, or you want to play with it for 6 months and you're willing to part with 6 months worth of subscription and cancel, there's so many opportunities to play around. There's no cost to playing around as long as you don't put sensitive company data in there or source data. Still want to be aware of that. Just mess around. I think I'll make one point and then I'll shut up. The thing that it reminds me of so much, and we've seen this in a couple different things, is you know, when you used to be able to work on your car, and this can sound like I'm like the good old days. No, but like engines used to be more open. Tools and gadgets and things used to be encouraged to take them apart and play with them. And slowly but surely, capitalism has sort of moved towards this enclosure mindset of everything. The hood of the car opens and it's all plastic with the windshield wiper and the battery connectors in case your thing died. That's all you can access. You touch your phone, it voids the warranty. You touch your MacBook, it voids the warranty. And there's this fear and there's this hesitancy from a lot of people that I've talked to even touch the thing, because they feel like if they touch the wrong button or they type the wrong thing, they're going to delete their computer or something. And I need people to get beyond that. I need you to understand that you can mess around with these things. If you do it smart, you can mess around with them, no cost, no risk. Just learn the language that is evolving out of this and the new way of speaking to our supercomputer co-pilots that are around us at all times. If you don't do that, or if you don't at least become literate in how to speak to people about it, you will be left behind in the same way that everybody seems to not be able, I mean, in the way that many people were left behind with mobile technology. And even still today, I have to show people on a regular basis what a browser window is. So you will be those people if in 5 years, if you don't at least understand the vocabulary of this, let alone some of the actual use cases.
I'll leave you with the final word, Amy. I think Joe summed up quite well from his side. What's your message to newsrooms through your experience and this training and the work you're doing with them? What are the main takeaways?
Yeah. For me, that this technology is accessible, both in terms of use and cost, more so than any other technology that's been out there. I know that especially for small newsrooms, you've been sold a bill of goods, maybe on your content management system, maybe on some of the plugins, and you have major tech regret, and I get that. But this is a moment where it will serve you if you try and push this to its limits and have robust discussions internally about what your limits are, what your transparency rules are, and what you will and won't do. I just think like it's essential that that you see this, and I hope that Joe and I brought you closer to accessing that rather than pushing it further away, because AI is not going to go away. It's going to get better. And for your reporters, this cuts across every beat. The police department is using something with AI. The schools are using something with AI. You need to be conversant in this topic so that your reporters can do what they've always done, which is ask tough questions to people in power.
Okay, great. So thank you both. That was fascinating discussion. And I think we can come back in 6 months and see where we are, see how it moves on, you know. So
That'd be great.
thanks again.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.